Good afternoon, everyone. We will continue today and hopefully finish this text by Dipankara Atisha. So yesterday we got through most of the paramita and Atisha's particular way of presenting the paramita in a way which is rather getting to the actual essential point behind the words. And so today we start with the sixth paramita, which is of course the crowning jewel of the paramita of wisdom. Because wisdom in Buddhism means seeing things clearly as they really are, and not the way that we normally are presented to us through our delusory senses and the kind of brain that we have. We think that how we see things is exactly how things actually are, and this is our big mistake, because things are not the way they appear to be at all. And we don't see with clear vision, we see with very distorted vision. So this is the understanding of the true nature is considered to be wisdom in Buddhism. So he says, the supreme wisdom is not to grasp onto anything as the self. So, for those of you who were here at the very beginning of this teaching, you will remember that the first line is the supreme learning is to realize the meaning of selflessness, or the absence of self. But here again reiterates that, because it's always considered that really our problem is that we reify everything. We make things into things, something very solid, and then we grasp onto that as if it's something unchanging, inherently real, and something which we can possess and own. And so there's this dual problem here. First, of thinking that there's actually a real solid enduring me, a real person there who is going to own something or someone out there who is likewise solid, real, enduring, and can be owned. So this, which we consider will be the cause of our happiness, actually ends up being the underlying trouble the whole way through, which is why the Buddha said that the cause of our dukkha, the cause of our suffering, is the grasping. The things themselves are not the problem, it's the grasping that's the problem. So here he's saying that the supreme wisdom is not to grasp onto anything, thinking that it's me and mine. Because when we look, when we uncover, it's like peeling off layers of an onion. We keep thinking we're going to get to the core. But actually, as we peel off more and more and more, we recognize there is no core. That it's not like that at all. And this is very hard for us to understand and appreciate. And it's the reason why people practice meditation. Meditation isn't about, blissing out, or as I said yesterday, sometimes it's more painful. We think that meditation is going to lead to bliss, but it might lead to many other very unwelcome emotions, not blissful at all. Or it might be blissful. You never can tell what's going to happen. But as we go deeper into the layers of our consciousness, looking for this me, this I, at the center, like a spider in a web, things keep unraveling and changing and going. They just, you cannot find something which is the core at the middle of it all. That is our whole basis of not seeing things how they really are. That we cling onto this little self, this ego. Ego is the Latin for I. And it's this sense of me at the center of everything, which is what causes all our problems. And so, in order to solidify this sense of self, which is always sliding away, we grasp onto people, we grasp onto objects, we grasp onto identity. I am who I am. I am a woman, I am a man, I am an Indian, I am a, whatever we are. And our status, and our family, and our education, and our race, and our religion, and our everything. Labels on top of labels on top of labels. And we think if we stick enough labels on, that will make it something real. But as we start taking away these labels through insight, through seeing clearly, which is what meditation is for, we recognize that these labels are essentially just being pasted on empty space. This does not mean we don't exist. When the Buddha said there is no self, he didn't mean we don't exist. Of course, we exist, but we don't exist in the way we think we exist. And what happens is that we identify with all the things which are very transitory and are not our true identity. Of course, from a Buddhist Hindu way of thinking, since we have endless rebirths, the personality that we have in this life, it would be very different last time, next time. But we cling on to all these factors and to the people around us and to our families and our friends and everything, because it seems that they substantiate our sense of identity. But as we begin to see, we recognize that none of these can be held, because they're always impermanent, they're changing moment to moment. We're all thinking everything is very static and solid and real. But one of the reasons why His Holiness the Dalai Lama and many other lamas nowadays are really very fascinated by both, by advances in scientific thought now, in particular with quantum physics and with neuroscience, both of which are on the edges of scientific exploration. And the reason why he is so fascinated by it is that they substantiate wisdom which has been known for millennia in India and elsewhere in Asia, but until very recently was completely blocked off from the Western way of seeing the world, which saw everything as being very solid. And now they recognize that, in fact, no thing at all has any ultimate inherent existence from its own side. Everything can be reduced and reduced back to space and energy, but also it's all interconnected, it's all interdependent. Nothing exists ultimately from its own side, independent of everything else. Everything, we are interrelated with everything. This is one of the great tragedies of, that very static way of seeing ourselves and seeing others and seeing nature is behind that force of our going out filled with our endless greed and aggression and destroying our planet. Because we don't see that we are all interdependent. I mean, just today I got a letter, an email from a good friend in Australia who lives in Sydney, and she is saying how Sydney is just covered in thick smoke and fog from the fires. They never had that before. Now from the north and the south, there are these huge bushfires, and Sydney is, she said she woke up, her eyes were streaming and her throat was raw from the smoke. Children can't go to school. It's just like Delhi. Children can't go to school. Outside workers can't work because the air pollution is so deep. And the same is happening in America. You know, year after year, the terrible forest fires in California and elsewhere. I mean, we're destroying our country. We're destroying our world, our poor little planet. And it's because of this very distorted way of seeing, not recognizing how interconnected we are with everything, not only with other beings, but also with nature. You know, you cut down the trees, you do anything, you know, I mean, we all know this. I mean, this whole ecological disaster has been predicted for years, but now people can see it's actually hitting home because they recognize actually we really are destroying our air, our water, our food supplies, and it's because we don't see things clearly. And so here, in Buddhism, the greatest wisdom is to recognize that nothing has any own, what is called svabhava, right? Its own being. It doesn't exist separately, inherently, from its own side as something. It's actually, when we try to grasp the thing in itself, it keeps disappearing and disappearing like a mirage. And so this, as I say, is why nowadays more and more lamas and other teachers are becoming fascinated by the fact that these insights which people had previously gained through their own meditation now have been ratified by the top scientists. And someone wrote an article, not in a Buddhist magazine, but in an ordinary magazine, about how nowadays quantum scientists are the world's most dedicated mystics, because they have really seen the world is not at all how we imagine it to be, how it is presented to us through our sense organs, the sense organs we have as humans, and the kind of brain that we have as humans. This creates our world. I mean, as I said the other day, actually, one Lama, Mingyur Rinpoche, he said that nowadays, and he's very in with these neuroscientists, and he said that nowadays neuroscientists are saying that what we receive from outer sensory perception is only 3%. I can't believe it, but he says so, so it ratifies what all the texts have said. He said it's only 3%, and 97% of what we perceive is supplied through our brain. Now, if that is true, and that's what he said, and he said this is the latest findings of the neuroscientists, actually we are creating, moment to moment to moment, our own reality, right? So, from millennia, the great yogis have understood this, that things are not the way we perceive them to be. They just are not. We are creating our own reality, moment to moment to moment. To actually realize that not intellectually, but really at the heart level, to realize that is considered to be supreme wisdom. So, okay, the supreme spiritual teacher is the one who exposes our hidden flaws, and the supreme instruction is the one that strikes those hidden flaws. So, obviously, if we, for example, if we go to a gymnasium, any of you likely to go to a gymnasium? If you had a trainer, or if for anything, if you want to learn golf, or you're learning a musical instrument, or any skill that we want to learn, we need to have a teacher who is honest and points out our flaws. If the teacher, hoping that we will like them and therefore always employ them, only praises us, even when we make mistakes, then we lose confidence, because obviously they don't really care about us enough, they don't really understand us enough, that even when we make mistakes, they don't point out what went wrong and how to correct those mistakes. So we trust the teacher to point out our flaws. Otherwise, why would we want a teacher? I mean, for example, if you're learning a musical instrument, then the easy way to play the instrument might not be the correct way to play the instrument. We don't know. This is easiest to hold it this way. No, you have to hold it that way. Oh, but that's so awkward. But finally, we discover that that indeed is the best way to play that instrument. How can we know? So we need a teacher who will show us what we don't see ourselves, because often we do not know ourselves. And it's other people who know us, the good parts and the not so good parts. But especially the not so good parts, sometimes we just don't see it. We think that's okay, but it's not okay. So therefore, we don't want a teacher who is only going to flatter us so that we'll like them. That's not a good teacher. We need a teacher who sees us very clearly how we really are and can point out where we are going wrong, because that way we can improve. If they don't show us our faults, we won't improve. So that's what he means. Of course, it doesn't mean that we need a teacher who only points out faults and never ever praises us for anything we do right. But nonetheless, the important point is that they should help us to correct where we have gone wrong, and can see us very clearly, so that they are able to guide us properly. If we have a guide, we want a guide that we can trust. And that guide has to know us really better than we know ourselves. So that all those flaws in us that we normally keep hidden, they see very clearly. Or even flaws which they're hidden because we don't see them ourselves. But they can see. And then they say, look, it's like that. And then, oh yeah, right, okay. And then we can change for the better. Otherwise, we just carry on the same way, carrying those flaws with us and wondering why we are not making any progress on the path. So, therefore, he is saying that the supreme teacher, the supreme spiritual teacher, is one who exposes our hidden faults. It's very important to have a teacher who is honest with us and sees us very clearly so that we can correct. And the supreme spiritual instruction is the one that strikes at those hidden flaws. So we have to look at our mind very honestly and our conduct and see our weaknesses, because all of us have weaknesses, all of us have faults. only a Buddha is faultless. So I don't think many of us are going to claim. And that's not a problem. You know, sometimes people say, oh, it's hopeless, I have so much anger, or I have so much greed, or I have so much jealousy, or whatever like this. And they regard these as being like an obstacle. I would be such a good practitioner if only I didn't have, I wasn't, emotional, or I wasn't angry all the time, or I wasn't this. I've always been like this. And regarding that as being, a reason why we are not going to make any progress. But the point is that for all of our problems, our character flaws, there is a remedy. There's an antidote. The negative emotions that we have are considered like a poison, but the poison has an antidote. And so therefore, for example, anger. In our monastery in Himachal, there was one monk who had trained to be a yogi, but he kept short hair. Most of our yogis have dreadlocks, but he had shaved hair. But he was so sweet. He was absolutely adorable, and everybody loved him. And he also worked as the headmaster for the small monks, and they were always clinging to him. They loved him. He was such a sweetheart. And I was told that when he was a monk in Tibet, he was so difficult and so irascible. He was so bad-tempered and fighting with everybody and really difficult, that finally he was told, look, either you train to be a yogi or you leave the monastery, because we can't take any more. So he decided to train to be a yogi, or Tokden, and he put a lot of emphasis on bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain enlightenment for the sake of all beings, and on compassion and loving kindness. And in a way, he almost overcompensated, because then he became the most sweet and lovable, much more than someone who doesn't have that problem and doesn't have to work to overcome it. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes our biggest obstacle becomes our greatest opportunity. And so for all our character flaws, there is an antidote. There is one of the beautiful things in Buddhism is that it doesn't just tell you to be good or to be kind or to be generous. It gives methods, techniques for acquiring this. It doesn't just tell us to be good, it shows us how. And so for anger, there are many methods for dealing with this anger inside of us, and coming from many different angles depending which is most helpful. Or for any of these qualities like jealousy or greed and so forth, there are methods which can be applied. The secret is to apply them. Because yes, we can read about that and say, oh yes, that's really very, very good. And then we try it, and then it doesn't really work, and it seems very artificial. And so we say, oh no, I can't do that. And then we don't do it, and then we don't change. But if we really apply ourselves and recognize that this is something important, I have to do it, and I will just keep doing it, eventually it becomes habitual. And in fact, something like anger, the Buddha himself said that the karma created from an angry mind is much, much more karmically negative than that from a greedy mind. But anger is much easier to overcome and transform than greed. Greed is very difficult. That attachment and clinging mind is very difficult to overcome. It's like deep roots in our psyche. But anger is fairly superficial, actually, and can be transformed. So what we need is only to discover what is our particular problem, which the teacher can point out for us. Laziness, low self-esteem, could be anything. But once the teacher has pointed it out, and we understand what is our main problems, then we can set to work to develop the techniques to overcome those problems. And as I say, often, as in a gymnasium, if you know, like, you have strong arms but weak legs, and then you get working on the machines, in the end, the legs become super strong, more than the arms, which haven't had much exercise. So, therefore, we need to know what we need to work on and to find out the methods needed to be applied so that we can transform our biggest obstacle into our greatest opportunity. Okay? Got it? Okay. So then, the supreme inspiration is enemies and hindrances, disease and suffering. Okay, so again, this is the foundation. Atisha was the founder of this lineage of the Kadampa, and one of their main emphases was that all those things which occur in our life, like sickness and loss, and all the difficulties we have, which we regard as being big obstacles for our life and our spiritual practice, if understood properly, become our greatest opportunities. And so this teaching called the Lojong, or the mind training, is a very, very useful. All the texts on Lojong are so practical, because they are not to do with just philosophical understanding or, the profound meditations of great yogis, but they are practical applications which we can take into our daily life and make use of right now as we are. And so this was a great gift. I mean, it's always been there, but he emphasized this. He and his later followers emphasize very much these teachings on how to take difficulties onto the path and make those difficulties into the path. And so this was a very great teaching which was then incorporated in all the various Buddhist traditions, and today is also being incorporated into all the Buddhist traditions in the West, etc., Zen and Theravada and any other. Now they're all studying these books on Lojong because they recognize this is really actually very useful, very practical. So this is just one line on that. Now the Tibetan uses the word kulma. And kulma is a bit like, here it's translated as inspiration, but it's really like a kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm looking at this Lama here, I'm not sure. But to my mind, it's like a whip that a rider would use on the horse to get them to gallop faster. Does that make sense, kulma? It's like a, what's the word for that? It incites them towards, running faster. It's whatever word that is. What? Tactless? It's what is the word? When you have like a whip or something which makes something, What? It gets you to go it incites you. It's an exhortation. It gets you going. So the thing is, what they're trying to say, I mean, he says inspiration, it's not really inspiration. It's the thing which makes, normally things like enemies, people who don't like us or are creating problems for us, or difficulties, hindrances, diseases, suffering, all these things tend to make us feel, oh, it's too difficult, I can't go on, I have all these problems, and I have to deal with my problems, and so, I can't meditate because I have all these, I'm sick, all these people are saying bad things about me, I have so many problems in the world, my business is falling apart, and so forth. And, maybe someone we love has just died, and so we are so overcome by all our problems that we give up our meditations and our interest in spiritual things because I've got more important things to think about. I'm unhappy. And so what he's saying is that far from being an obstacle, a block to our spiritual practice, if understood properly, these are actually an incentive towards when do we need the Dharma most? When we're in trouble, when we're grieving, when we have all sorts of problems in our life, that is when we really need a spiritual path. And so many people I know who are going through many, many problems at this moment in their lives, or have just lost somebody, or are going through difficult divorces and so forth, they say, oh, thank goodness for the Dharma. What else would I have done if without that? So, not Dharma just as Buddhism, but any spiritual path. That is when we really need it. And if it can't help us, what use is it? It's no use having a spiritual belief which collapses in the face of trouble. By rights, it should make us stronger. It should be a real help and benefit. Otherwise, what use is it? I mean, we don't need it when everything's going well. I mean, we do need it, but not as much as we need it when everything's falling apart. And so in these Lojong teachings, which came through Atisha down through, especially in the 12th and 13th centuries, there is a lot of teaching on how to take these various troubles, enemies, hindrances, disease, sickness, suffering, how to use that as a way to increase our spiritual understanding, and to take these things and to transform them around so that eventually we look back and see that this was a time, that difficult time was actually the time when we made a great leap forward spiritually. Because otherwise we can, if everything's going okay, we just, lounge along, but when we have some real challenge, then either we collapse or we stand up strong and we take our spiritual beliefs and understandings and what we have really gotten from so far from our practice and apply it properly. I mean, many people, especially as they get older, when they look back, say, oh, that time when this happened, that happened, I was sick, or I lost my husband or my child, or this or that happened, or, and it seemed like the end of the world. And then I, pulled myself together and I really applied the teachings, And now I look back and say, that was one of the best times of my life. It was painful, but I learned so much. So this is what he's saying, is that really often we learn most, we develop most, we become really one with the teaching due to the difficulties we meet in life, not the easy part. This is not that we're wishing anybody problems. We all wish everybody to be well and happy. But nonetheless, when things are not well and happy, we wish them the strength and the insight and the skill to take that difficulty and transform it into the path. I mean, truly, if we are given to prayers, to praying to whoever we have faith in, then the prayer should be simply that whatever happens, we will learn from that, and we will be able to transform it into our spiritual practice. Not that everything should go the way the ego wants it to go, because the ego is very, very narrow-minded and only thinks of pleasure and pain. But the real prayer is that we should have the wisdom and the strength to take anything which happens and make that our spiritual path. Then whatever happens, we can deal with it, no problem. With that attitude overcomes hope and fear. Nothing to be anxious about, because whatever happens, we will deal with it, we will make use with it. And it's not that we need always to have everything going the way the ego wants it to go. It's a very, very important point. I mean, I sometimes tell the story of when I was, many, many years ago, just after I left the cave, this was in the late 80s, and I went down on pilgrimage to South India. And while we were there, I met with this astrologer. And so I said to him, well, you know, I have a choice at this point. Either I can go back into retreat, or I can start a nunnery. What should I do? So he did his calculations. Then he said, well, if you go back into retreat, very peaceful, very pleasant, very nice. If you start a nunnery, many problems, many difficulties, many challenges. But both are good, so you decide. So then I thought, okay, back in retreat. And so then I was mentioning this to a Catholic priest I met, and he said, well, obviously, you start a nunnery. And he said, it's like we are pieces of rough wood. And if we always stroke ourselves with silk and velvet, that's very nice, but we don't get smooth. To get smooth, we need sandpaper. Of course, we don't need too much sandpaper. We rub ourselves raw. But sandpaper makes us smooth. And so, if everything is endlessly pleasant and easy, we can fool ourselves into thinking we're ever so much nicer and more spiritually advanced than we really are. It's only when we come up against challenges, difficulties, unwanted occurrences, that we get a genuine insight into what's really going on and how much we've really understood. And at the same time, it gives us the opportunity to take those difficulties and turn them into spiritual opportunities by taking all our problems onto the path. Not just the good things which happen, that's the path, and the other things we try to avoid. But recognizing everything that happens to us can teach us something. Everything. Life is the schoolroom. We're here to learn, to develop. And we cannot develop if all the lessons are too easy. No child at school wants the lessons to be always too easy, because then they're not developing. They want to be challenged. That's how they grow. And it's the same for all of us. Doesn't matter what age we are. We have to learn, we have to grow. And one of the main ways of learning is by facing up to the problems and the challenges of life, and using that as a way to develop more inner compassion, more inner detachment, more inner understanding and wisdom, and so forth. So, difficulties, when they come, we shouldn't just, give up. We should recognize that these are telling us something, and using those difficulties to make progress, inner progress. So this is very important, really, for all of us. And any of you who are interested in these sort of things, you really should read some Lojong texts, because they are very helpful and full of good advice for everyday life, how to take all these difficulties, sickness, loss, and so forth, and make use of it. Instead of avoiding, we can welcome them, because they are going to help us to mature and be better people. So then he says, the supreme method. Oh no, wait a minute. I've lost out. Oh, I lost out on such an important thing. Whoa, you should have shouted out at me immediately. Supreme companions are mindfulness and alertness. So mindfulness, of course, now has become this big catchword around the world. A while back, I saw this page advertisement in Time magazine for a book which they have published called Mindfulness, the New Science of the Mind. Time has just discovered it, so it's new, right? So this word mindfulness translates the Sanskrit word smriti, which means to remember, really. And in Pali that is sati, in Tibetan is trempa. And trempa also means to remember. It's the usual word to remember. And so everybody is more or less agreed that the translation for that will be mindfulness. Sometimes they say awareness. But the other word, samprajñāna, or something like this it is, nobody can agree on how it should be translated into English. In Tibetan it's shēzhin. So it's called alertness here, introspection, consciousness, clear comprehension, awareness. Nobody really has, we don't have a word, in other words. Sometimes it happens. There are some words in Sanskrit and Tibetan which more or less, yes, this would be an English equivalent, this will do. And everybody's agreed that, all right, we'll use that word. Not perfect, but good enough. But there are other words which really nobody can agree on, because there really isn't a word that actually gives that feeling of what the original means. And so this is one of those words. And it has many connotations. But here, when conjoined with mindfulness, which means to be present with what is happening, basically. Right mindfulness is the ability to be knowing what is happening while it's happening and not get distracted. This other word, which they're calling alertness here, is a mental faculty which has many, many different uses, but the main one is that it checks up to see what's happening. So if, for example, one is meditating and applying mindfulness to the breath, then from time to time this little mind looks out and sees, oh, are we distracted? Are we sinking and dull and going to sleep? No, he's nicely there, knowing, breathing in, breathing out, fine, and back he goes. It's like a spy, right? Just checks up what's going on. And if everything is fine, then it just recedes again. It just stays, it's not there the whole time, just checking up. And if things are not fine, then it gives the opportunity to recognize that we're not mindful of the breath. We're thinking about what we had for lunch yesterday. And so then, back to the breath, right? So it checks. Or if we are sitting there blissed out, breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing. Then it recognizes that this is not the peace of meditation, this is just slumber. So in that way, throughout the day, it can come up and look, what's happening at this moment? Where is our mind? What feelings are in our mind? What thoughts are in our mind? Checking up. So the two go together, and in Tibetan usually they say trenche. Then they combine the two together. It's this alertness within the awareness, so that the awareness doesn't kind of sink, that the awareness stays clear, focused, and present. So it's an aid for our mindfulness, right? It helps us to recognize what's going on in the mind and whether mindfulness is in place or not in place. So these are our best companions, because our real problem for daily life is that we are normally so very distracted. And our mind usually is dwelling in the past with our memories and thoughts about what happened before, or else caught up with plans and fantasies and dreams and hopes and fears for the future, and very little attention given to what is happening right now. Or if we do see what is happening right now, it's still clothed in our opinions, judgments, thoughts, and so forth. We don't see things nakedly. We always clothe them in our opinions and judgments. And so this mindfulness, this awareness is for unclothing and seeing things as they are instead of how we are fabricating it with our mind. So mindfulness is the Buddha said it is the one path to liberation. This ability to be aware. We are always aware, but we don't recognize that we are aware. I mean, we are aware because you can hear me and you can see me, so you know. But we don't know that we know. And so meditation is for helping us to recognize Those qualities of mind we already have. It's not we have to develop something we don't have. What we have to do is recognize what we've already got. And so this ability to be aware is the ability to be conscious. We're always conscious, but we're not conscious of being conscious. And so we are endlessly caught up in all the fabrications of our mind without recognizing those are simply fabrications of the mind. There's nothing wrong with thinking. Thoughts are not the problem. I mean, it's wonderful as human beings that we have our intelligence. I mean, nothing wrong. It's not that we're trying to blank out. It's nothing to do with having no thoughts. What it is within those having those thoughts, that we are not totally immersed in those thoughts and swept along by the thoughts, but that we can observe the thoughts. We are aware of the thoughts. Like the traditional example is if we think of the mind stream, all our thoughts and feelings, as a rushing river, then we are normally completely submerged in that river. And we're carried along by the river. We're completely saturated. So what we are trying to do is to step out and sit on the banks of the river. We're not damming up the river, we're not stopping the river. But now we're not swept along by the river, we are on the banks watching the river. So this is why he says earlier on that the supreme oral instruction is to observe the mind at all times, right? So what he's saying is the best thing to do is to sit on the banks of the river and just watch the river going by. So this is a very important instruction, and in order to sit on the banks of the river and watch the river going by, in other words, in order to be able to observe the mind, we have to be aware. And so our meditation is to cultivate the ability to be aware. This is why yesterday we were saying that the object is not the important thing, that the object is just a support for us learning how to be aware or how to be mindful. Right? So whether we are mindful of the breath, mindful of the mind, mindful of a sound, mindful of walking, mindful of sitting, mindful of anything, we nonetheless, the object is not the important factor. The important factor is cultivating the ability to know, to be aware, to be mindful. So this is the very first stage of meditation. Learning how to be aware. So, throughout the day, as much as possible, one of the advantages of using the breath as an object of meditation is that we are always breathing. So therefore, throughout the day, as much as possible, especially when we get agitated or stressed, we can just bring the attention back, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. Just whoo. And as I said, the other importance of the breath is that we cannot breathe in the past or the future. We only breathe now. So if we are really aware of the breath, not thinking about being aware of the breath, but actually being aware, then we are present. And the ego cannot live in the present. The ego in the present just clothes the present in its ideas and thoughts and feelings. It cannot stay nakedly in the present. So during those times when we are actually focused on the breath, in a completely aware and open, spacious, relaxed, not tight, but relaxed, spacious, but completely knowing the breath as it comes in and out, without commentary, nakedly, then we are genuinely in a state of non-ego, even for a short time. So this is very important. It's a way to go in to the practice, which is very practical because anybody can do it. It's not something which is, very high. Everybody can breathe. Everybody can know their breath. That's enough. During the day, the Buddha also recommended that when we are walking or standing, sitting, lying down, we know it. Popular meditation, especially in the Theravada school, but our nuns also do this meditation. Sometimes some of our nuns, every morning they do a meditation for half an hour, and some of them like to sit and do sitting meditation, but especially those who are a bit sleepy like to do walking meditation. So they walk very slowly, but you're conscious of walking. And so the Buddha, this is part of what the Buddha taught, that we can be also very mindful in any position. So when we're walking down a corridor, we can know we're walking down the corridor. When we're sitting, we can be aware of the body, how it feels. Lying down, standing, any time, eating, drinking, talking. Either we are conscious of that and aware, or we are not. There's no halfway. Either we're aware or we are not aware. But awareness is the way to freedom. So the supreme method is to be natural. So again, we don't have to pretend to be who we're not. I mean, sometimes people, when they get on a spiritual path, then they read all the books about how you're supposed to be. I mean, Tibetan books are full of the behavior of 8th level bodhisattvas, and everybody thinks this is exactly how they have to act, and so they're doing their very, very best to be a super best Buddhist. And it doesn't work, because we are just playing a part. Of course, we should try to be disciplined and aware and kind and compassionate, beyond our abilities on one level. But at the same time, we shouldn't try to pretend to be something we are not, because that is basically it just doesn't work. I mean, people know you're not real. And, they're trying to pretend to be who you aren't. And ever so sweet, because bodhisattvas are ever so sweet. Doesn't work. Because inside what you're feeling and outside how you're pretending to be don't go together. And so we need to be true. We need to be honest. We need to stop pretending. Of course we are trying to improve ourselves. Of course we're trying to be better people. But at the level we are at, and merely changing also, I mean, I can say this for our nuns, merely shaving your head and put on long robes doesn't make you, actually it doesn't even really make you a nun. Because, what's going on in your mind, that's the important thing. And to be honest with ourselves, how we feel. For example, if somebody annoys us, then we feel upset, then we should at least know that that's how we feel. Yes, we are going to try to apply the antidotes. Yes, we are going to try to take that person to be our teacher of patience, but at the same time, we have to be honest that although we are going to try to be much more patient, right now we're really upset and angry. And not pretend, especially to ourselves, that that's not how we feel, because the books say that's not how you should feel. So in other words, we should try to be very, very natural and true to ourselves, while we are still working at, making improvements, but not by being false, not by... I met one time one female guru, I won't say who, but I think she has quite a following. But I don't know, she immediately started to talk to me about, I don't know, kind of very kind of abstract kind of spiritual things. I mean, the feeling I got was that was her normal way of talking to people. It wasn't anything about anything. It was just, all this high stuff. And I really wanted to say, look, dear, I've been in this game longer than before you were born. Just come down to earth. It wasn't real. And someone said to me afterwards, one of her devotees, what did you think of the master? And I said, well, she's probably lots of fun when she stops playing at being a guru. Because, it wasn't real. And all the great gurus I ever met were great fun. They were lovely people and completely natural. And not like that at all. They weren't trying to be a guru. They probably weren't even thinking of themselves as gurus. And so they were completely at ease with themselves, completely natural. And that quality of their true being shone forth. I mean, one is deeply affected by advanced beings who at the same time are completely, if they're trying to do anything, they're trying to look normal, right? Not look extraordinary. They're trying to look like everybody else, even if they're not. So it's very important not to be pretentious. That's the word. Don't be pretentious. Don't think, I am on a spiritual path. People do. Have you been to ashrams? Don't do that. Just be natural, just be normal. And, observe the mind. But of course, we all try to be more kind, more patient, more generous. Doesn't mean we just leave ourselves the way we are and we don't try to improve. But, we should at the same time not try to pretend to be something we're not, or at a higher level than we are. We should be very honest. The supreme way of benefiting is to help others enter the Dharma. So, the Dharma here, it's not just Buddhism, but I think any genuine spiritual path, if people show an interest, then we should encourage them. I think if people do not show an interest, then we should not try to force them. Just, this is my guru and everybody should follow my guru. That just creates a lot of tension. But we can offer the Dharma. Probably in ashrams here, and certainly in monasteries and temples in like China or Korea or so forth, it's the custom for people to make donations for Dharma books, Buddhist books, to be published. And then they are put out for free in the temples. So if you go to a temple, you have these books, which are sometimes really very excellent books, which they have republished. and are distributed for free. If you want one, you can take one. If you don't want one, you don't have to take it. So nobody's forcing you. You're not standing at street corners holding out and trying to force people to take. But if they want it, it's offered. And this is considered to be a very good way of making good karma, of making punya or merit, that we offer the Dharma. If people want it, they pick it up. If they don't want it, they walk by. It's up to them. But because spiritual traditions are so helpful in people's lives, therefore, to be able to help people to find that if they need it is a wonderful thing. It's the best gift. The Buddha said the supreme gift is the gift of the Dharma. It's the gift of truth, basically. Because many people, if they're, for example, you might have friends or relatives who are going for a very, very difficult time, and if you slip them a small book on genuine spiritual teachings, might be a lifesaver for them. In India, it's less so, but in the West, it may be even today, it's very often very difficult to come across spiritual sources. I mean, you go into a bookshop, it's full of things which are not to do with spiritual beings. I mean, and many times I hear from people who, when they were young, had very profound spiritual experiences. I mean, the real, genuine shift in consciousness, which made them doubt everything that they were seeing and being told. But there was nobody to ratify what they had experienced. They all said, no, you're crazy. You're mad. Some of them were actually put in, sanatoriums. Because, until very, very recently in the West, these things were not known. And so, if only at that time, eventually, they come across a book on Dharma and they say, oh, but that's just exactly what I recognized. That's what I realized. And nobody understood, and they all thought I was nuts. And it put them out of tune with everybody, and they doubted themselves, of course, because although they felt inside themselves that this was true, everybody, including their teachers, their parents, the priests, everybody was telling them, you mustn't think like that. That's just crazy. And so the gift of truth, of Dharma, is an extraordinary gift and can transform a person's life. There's nothing we can give them. You can give them crores and crores of rupees. It's nothing. That doesn't mean anything compared with a few true sentences of Dharma, which can completely transform anyone's life if they understand what's being said. This is really why, India is India, but, in your mainstream newspapers, like the Times of India and so forth, amidst all the murders, rapes, and corruption charges, you have the speaking tree. I don't know, I can't imagine any newspaper in England doing that. It's so beautiful. That voice of sanity in the midst of all the madness. The offering of Dharma. Every day, in all the other stuff going on, there is the candle lit in the midst of all the darkness. That's what's great about India. They haven't completely forgotten. And even in your very worldly newspapers, there is the voice of truth every day. It's beautiful. You should be proud of that. The gift of truth is the greatest gift. And India was the source of so much truth. So many great religions started here. You should be very proud of that. I mean, that's a wonderful achievement. Well done. But don't forget, that was India's greatest gift to the world, was the Dharma. So, the last thing here is the supreme benefit is a mind that turns towards the Dharma. So, again, it is easy for us to have an outward display of interest. We go to temples, we go to monasteries, we, recite mantras, we visit gurus, we practice yoga, we do all these things. And outwardly it looks like very good. But has the mind really turned towards the truth? This is the question. Because it's the mind that determines everything, really. It determines what we say and what we do, but it also determines our karma. It determines our whole life is in the mind. So outwardly we might appear very pious, and we might be going visiting all the great gurus and staying in ashrams and monasteries and making donations, and outwardly looks very, very good. But inwardly, has the mind, is the Dharma at the center of our life? Or is it on the periphery when we have time? That's the point. Are our spiritual principles really the pivot of our life, the center? Or just, like a hobby? Something we give attention to when, the occasion arises, or on special festival days and so forth. We all go and make offerings, or we go off on pilgrimage. But, the rest of the time during the day, it's all forgotten. We don't remember anything. It's not important. What is the most important thing in our life? Without which we would give up everything else, but not that. So he said, therefore the greatest benefit for us is to turn the mind towards the Dharma, meaning that we have the Dharma, everything else circles around that. Our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to others, our family, our work, our joys, our sorrows, everything has the Dharma at the center. When that happens, then the mind transforms. Otherwise, if we just have it, when we have a bit of time, or it becomes very ritualistic, but it's not really speaking to our heart, then it doesn't transform. Dharma is meant to transform our mind. Our whole heart has to change. And that can only happen when we put the Dharma really at the center, and everything else is around that. So, now we will sit for maybe 10 minutes this time. And after that, if there are any questions, please do write them down. Again, please just So again, please just sit nicely, keep your back straight but not tense, and your hands either in your lap or on your knees, and just relax. Don't make the mind tense. Keep the mind very relaxed and spacious, but focused. And here again we will focus on the incoming and the outgoing of the breath, especially with a little more attention on the outgo of the breath. We breathe out, and then naturally we breathe in. And then we breathe out, and then we breathe in. Slightest pause between breathing in and breathing out, and breathing in again. Just a very slight pause. This is not an exercise in pranayama. This is just breathing. And all you have to do is just sit there, breathe, and know you're breathing. That's it. Just the emphasis on the knowing, on the awareness, and using the breath like a crutch, like a support. But the important thing is this sense of being aware, being present. And if the mind gets distracted and goes off, no problem, just bring it back again. If there are noises and sounds and they break in, then we can use that sound of being aware. We're aware of the sound. That's fine. That sound becomes the meditation. When the sound ceases, we go back to the primary meditation of the breath. So simple. Breathe and know we are breathing. Okay? So, does anyone have any questions? We are told that when one is born, our destiny is already written. What does Lord Atisha say about this? Can following the path change one's destiny? Well, according to Buddhism, that is not true. It is not that our destiny is written. If we consider that we have had innumerable past lives, then in all those past lives, not just as human beings, but maybe animals in the spirit realms, in so many different aspects of life on this planet, then during all those endless lifetimes, we have done just about everything, good, bad, and indifferent. And all of our intentional actions of body, speech, and mind are, as it were, planting seeds in this huge, vast field. So there's zillions and zillions of seeds in there. And some are very strong seeds, which are definitely going to come up. And others are weaker seeds, which might not come up yet. Some are quite poisonous seeds, some are beneficial seeds. But there are so many seeds. And it really depends which seeds are going to come up in accordance with causes and conditions. When the causes and conditions come together, that seed will rise. And so, although there might be a general pattern because of very strong seeds which have been planted in the past life, doesn't mean that that's implacably going to happen. So there's not destiny. It's just that, in general, this is going to happen. But the point is that moment after moment, we are eating up our past, the past karmas, but how we respond is creating our future karmas. So every moment we're at the crossroads. And if we respond to a situation skillfully, that will set in motion different karmas, vipaka. The result of the karmas, the karma vipaka, will be different from if we respond unskillfully. This is another reason why it's very important to be aware, to be mindful, so that whatever happens to us, we respond skillfully. So therefore, also on a wider pattern, it's not so important what is happening as how we are responding to what is happening. Because how we are responding is creating our future, moment to moment to moment. There is a story in the Pali Canon of one time the Buddha with some disciples, some monks, was traveling outside of a town, and near the city walls was this tramp, this derelict person who was an alcoholic and a gambler and had died. And his corpse was thrown outside the city walls. And the Buddha said that this had been a nobleman, a young nobleman, who had met with the Buddha and had wanted to be a monk. But then his family persuaded him not to be a monk, and so he got married, but then he ended up becoming an alcoholic and a gambler and lost all his fortune, and in the end was just a derelict. And And so the Buddha said, had he chosen to be a monk, he would have become an arahat, meaning he would have attained nirvana and liberation. But because he made the wrong choice, he ended up as just being, an outcast from society. So the point was, the Buddha was saying he had a choice. It wasn't his destiny to end up as a derelict. He could have become an arahat, but he made the wrong choice. And that making the wrong choice set into motion more other karmas. So moment to moment, it's like, it's very, I don't know what the word is, I have this feeling, everything is interchanging and moment to moment to moment, depending on how we are responding and reacting in that moment, everything is clicking into place. So it's not at all that we have a destiny. We ourselves are creating our own destiny, moment to moment to moment. That's why we can be liberated. If it was already set down, there would be no point. Because if we were not meant to be liberated, we wouldn't be, and if we were, no matter what we did, we would be. But it isn't like that. It's very fluid. And so this is why also, because we don't know what's going to come up, therefore, bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And it's because there's so much there, and you never know when the causes and conditions will ripen that seed. And so therefore we cannot know what's going to happen to us. It's not that it's all set down there. There are certain patterns which for some people especially are quite strong, and the probability that they will go that way is more strong. But it doesn't have to be. And for many people, it can go either way, depending on how they make use of the circumstances which are happening in their life at this time. So that's why we ourselves have to be the makers of our own destiny. We cannot just think, oh, it's all up in the stars and I have nothing to do. I can't do anything. We can do everything. So that even the most awful people can transform. At the time of the Buddha, the famous example of Angulimala, who had killed 999 people. I never quite understood why he killed them. He only wanted a finger. Couldn't he just cut the finger off? Why did he have to kill him? But anyway, the story is he killed them. And imagine the karma of killing that many people, nearly 1,000 people. But when he met with the Buddha and, then deeply repented, and he became an arahat. Because also, no matter how strong and negative our karma is, when we realize that there is no agent behind our actions, there is actually no ego there that is performing the actions, then the whole edifice falls away and we go beyond karma. This is why an enlightened being no longer creates karma. Because the karma is kept together, we are connected with our actions by the belief that we perform the actions. When we recognize that it's not like that at all, and that there is no agent, there is no actor, then the whole thing just collapses, and that's how we can be free. As long as we believe there is an agent, then we are trapped on the wheel, and we just keep going round and round and round. The way to destroy the wheel is to recognize there's no actor behind the actions. So don't worry about destiny, just everybody do their bit and, believe that our destiny, our real destiny, good news, our real destiny is to become Buddha. Might take an awfully long time, but eventually we're all going to realize our innate Buddha nature, which we already have, we just don't recognize. So our ultimate destiny is to be free. So the best we can do in this lifetime is to work towards that now, while we have the chance. because in the future, who knows where we will be and what will happen to us. And right now we have the opportunity, the teaching is there, the teachers are there, the opportunity to practice has never been better than right now. So if we delay and postpone, then who knows what will happen tomorrow? Next life. This is the time. This is the opportunity. So please, all of you, take this seriously and genuinely try to put Dharma at the center of your lives. No more questions? Are we going to finish quickly?
One question, but his writing is...
Okay, fair enough. Okay, hold on 1 minute. Is selfishness natural? If yes, is repressing it unnatural? No, our inherent nature is completely pure. It's completely perfect. Somewhere along the line, we fell from grace, as all religions tell us. And Buddhism doesn't put it in those words. But at some point we fell into ignorance. We fell into unseeing. We fell into unawareness. And so this is our unnatural state. Our egoity, our selfishness is unnatural. Our natural state is completely pure. So we have to, in Buddhism, our greed and grasping, our anger, jealousy, pride, and so forth, all the obscurations of the mind are called what is in English adventitious. Adventitious means that they are not inherent. They are something which comes from the outside. In other words, they are not natural. So we are not inherently angry or greedy. One time, there was this woman who was giving a talk, and anyway, she said, she was a psychiatrist, and she said many people come to her and say, don't tell me anything about all this. Really, since I was a child, being angry has been second nature to me. And she said, yes, that's right, that's your second nature. What is your first nature? And that's the point. So even in our language, I don't know, you might not do this in Hindi, but even unwittingly in English, we talk about second nature, meaning it's natural. But actually, second nature means second nature, not first nature. Our first nature is completely pure. It's like silver. I mean, don't take these analogies too concretely. But it's like silver. If you have a silver pot and you don't polish it, then it gets tarnished. And after a while, it will turn even black. And so when we look at the pot, all we see is the black. And we think, oh, this is a black, ugly pot. But if we start polishing it, then eventually we will get back to the silver. Now, the silver has never been polluted by the black. This is the point. The black does not penetrate into the silver. The silver is just silver. It was just covered by the tarnish. But it itself was not tarnished. Do you understand? And this is the point. This is the point which I think in India has been understood better than any country. That we have a silver pot mind. We do not have a tarnished mind, ultimately. That we can clean away the tarnish. That's the whole point. because it is not inherent, our natural mind is completely pure. But it's got covered over by our egoic poisons of the mind. They poison the mind stream, but the mind stream itself is completely pure. And even those poisons, if we look at them, like our anger, our greed, our jealousy, if we look straight at them nakedly, are empty. They're not solid. It's like clouds in the sky, black, dark clouds. But then they just melt away into the sky. Where are they? They're empty. And the sky is still the sky, totally untarnished, however black the clouds may be. So this is the important thing. If we were inherently evil, there would be no help. But we are inherently perfect. We just don't recognize it because it's covered over by the clouds of the ego and the polluted states of mind centering around this ego. But the ego itself is not real. If we look for it, we can't find it. It's just causes and conditions coming together. And then we think this is me. But it's not me. The true nature of the mind is beyond all thoughts of self and other. As I said before, it's perception without a perceiver. As the Buddha said, in the seeing there is only the seeing, in the hearing there is only the hearing, in the perceiving there is only the perceiving. It's not that there is a solid entity behind it all. It's this open spaciousness. As Mingyur Rinpoche said when he had his near-death experience, it was not that he became one with the universe, it was that the universe came within him. We have everything within us, but we just don't know it. Because we're always looking outside. We don't know we have the treasure within us. So we think we're stupid, we think we're this, we think we're that. We keep beating ourselves up. Because we don't see who we really are. And who everyone else really is. This is our tragedy. This is why the greater the wisdom, the greater the compassion. It's because, these beings who have genuine wisdom look at us all and think, oh, goodness me. Here they are inherently Buddhas, and they think that they're just flawed sentient beings. They don't know what their true nature is. And they don't know how to fulfill that deep, endless sense of, like a black hole inside, that we have to fill up with things and people and relationships to make us feel okay. But we can never be satisfied. As the Buddha said, like drinking salty water. And all the time we're looking in the wrong direction. This is what genuine spiritual path is about. It's about coming home to our true nature again, where we've never actually left, but we don't know that. So, this is why all these teachings are important, because they're talking to each one of us and saying, look, this is the most important thing that can ever happen in all our lifetimes, is to come into contact with the truth. One of my friends just messaged me on my phone. He doesn't know I'm here at the teachings. He's asking, can a narcissist find hope in spirituality? Yes, if they cease to be a narcissist. I mean, you know, we come from everywhere. We come with our flawed minds. If we were perfect before we came to a spiritual path, we wouldn't need a spiritual path. Isn't it? It's because we are flawed, because we are involved in our ego, because we have all these character defects that we need a spiritual path. If we were so perfect, we wouldn't. So even if we arrive at on the spiritual path because the ego wants to be spiritual and polish itself up so everybody will admire it and say, oh, he's ever so spiritual, you know, I'm superior. I shouldn't criticize people, but I did meet this minor Bollywood movie star. Our assistant, our office manager, Keita, I hadn't a clue who he was. I still don't know who he was, so I'm not telling you anything. But he walked in, and our office manager, Keita, who considers herself quite a poised lady, went, "Ah!" when he moved in. And then she was so mortified that she had screamed at seeing him. Anyway, he was now on a spiritual path, he told me. And he kept going on about how we spiritual people should, you know, deal with these mere mortals who were not spiritual like we were. I mean, you know, so he said, well, what can I do, you know, to help these, you know, mere sentient beings that we have to deal with? So I said, how about making movies with a real, genuine meaning to them? You know, I mean, make movies which give a good message, a good spiritual message, you know? I mean, instead of all these stupid movies people are making with exactly the wrong message. I don't think he'd ever thought of that before. But he seemed to think it was a good idea. I don't know what happened to him. But so, you know, yes, he was on one hand a total narcissist, you know, absolutely seeing himself as, you know, salvation of Bollywood. But who knows? As a result, he might go to meet many great teachers and, you know, might even get himself into doing some retreats and so forth. And we all have to start somewhere. So, I mean, you know, I didn't put him down because I felt, well, this is where he's starting from. You know, I mean, he has a huge ego, but then maybe that's his entry. Is by seeing himself as, you know, kind of, you know, next year's great guru. Who knows? We have to all enter somewhere. And so, yes, tell your narcissistic friend that, you know, a narcissist can start on the spiritual path, and if he's genuinely practicing, he will end up as a non-narcissist and enlightened. Right? We all have Buddha nature, even narcissists. I mean, the ego is the one in the beginning. Our ego is going to be walking the path. This, I think, is very, very important for people to understand, because Buddhism is all about no self, no self, no self. No ego. But who is saying, I have no ego? Me. Right? The ego is telling itself it doesn't exist. So the Buddha, in his wisdom, started by training and taming our ego to make it well-balanced and healthy in order that it could walk the path towards non-ego. We do not become egoless just by saying, I have no ego. We become egoless by having our ego walk the path towards deeper insight until finally it falls away into deeper levels of consciousness. So the Buddha started by teaching people how to calm the mind through calm abiding meditation, shamatha, and also through the what are called the 4 Brahma Viharas, are immeasurable practices of loving kindness, maitri, and karuna, compassion, mudita, empathetic joy in the good things which are happening to us, not just compassion for what's gone wrong, but also rejoicing in all the goodness. And upeksha, meaning impartiality towards those we are close to, those we are. So we start by giving loving kindness and compassion and rejoicing in the goodness first towards ourselves. Now the Buddha was not telling us to give loving kindness and compassion to our Buddha nature. Our Buddha nature doesn't need our loving kindness and compassion. Our Buddha nature is loving kindness and compassion. So who are we directing it to? May I be well and happy. May I be peaceful. Wishing ourselves that we should be happy and how nice that would be and free from suffering. How lovely that would be. Who are we wishing that to? Well, we're wishing it to our sense of self, our ego. Why? Because until we make friends with ourselves, accept ourselves, are kind to ourselves, we cannot give to others. So first we give love to and compassion to ourselves, then to those we love and are close to, then towards people that we never give much thought to one way or another. Are they happy? Are they sad? Neutral people that we meet and know, the neighbors or people working in our company or people working in wherever we are, or anybody that we feel neutral towards. Just thinking, they want to be happy. They want to be free from suffering just like I do. May that happen for them. How lovely if they could be happy and free from all their problems. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And then towards people we have difficulties towards, people who have hurt us or we don't like them very much, or difficult people for us, wishing them happiness. Wishing that they should be free from all their problems and sufferings. And so forth. And then, delighting in the goodness and hoping that, all the good things, being pleased for that, or the happiness they get in their life, being pleased for that. But we start with ourselves. So, you could say the Buddha was encouraging us all to be narcissists, because he's telling us, oh, come on, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. Isn't it? Because we need a healthy, well-balanced sense of self. We need to make friends with ourselves in order to be able to walk the path towards non-self. If we have an injured sense of self, it's very difficult to walk the path. So first we have to heal. We have to be healthy within in order to really accomplish. Egos which are very unhappy are always thinking about themselves. A healthy ego doesn't think about itself so much. I say it's like if you break a leg, then the leg you have to put it in a cast. You can't walk with it very well. You need a... Oh, always thinking about my poor leg. Ow. If anybody hits the leg slightly, ow, ow, ooh, ooh, ooh. Leg, oh my poor leg, my poor leg. But then, when the leg is healed, then we can run, skip and jump. If somebody hits it, ouch, and then we've forgotten it. And we're not thinking leg. How many people are sitting thinking leg, unless they're sitting cross-legged and their legs hurt? Right? When your leg is healthy, you're not thinking about it. So like the ego. When ego is in pain, then we're always thinking me, 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 me. That's why there's so many, in the West especially, so many psychiatrists and psychotherapists. They're there to deal with people's sick egos. And people sit there and talk about me, 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 the whole time. My childhood, my parents, my this, my that, me, me, me. And they're not interested in anybody else. They're only interested in telling you about their problems, their difficulties, their horrible life. Why? Because they're sick. But if the ego is healthy and well balanced through meditation and through giving these practices of, giving love and compassion to ourselves, making friends with ourselves, healing ourselves, then we're not thinking about ourselves. Other people are much more interesting. So your narcissistic friend is welcome to practice on the path. Of course, because we all start off as narcissists. If we had to wait till we were egoless, nobody would ever get started. But the spiritual path is exactly for that. To transform our big inflated egos into genuine caring and love for others. Isn't it? Okay, so we leave it there. What?
Question?
One question, but it has to be a simple, easy one.
Okay, then the easy one would be different from Jetsunma. It would be, let's say someone has a glimpse of awareness.
Yes.
Then how does that person extend that? Like find the person he considers the guru and like catch hold of the person and say, now extend it? Or how?
I mean, the glimpse of the nature of the mind is regarded in many ways as the genuine start to on the road to meditation. Genuine meditation starts after one has had a glimpse. The problem always is that then, having had the glimpse, one wants more glimpses, but the very wanting will prevent that from happening. So it's, on the other hand, if you don't do anything, then of course you won't get a glimpse again. So therefore it's a balancing act between the ego wanting to claim that experience, that realization, and at the same time, just because the ego wants to get in on the game, it prevents further glimpses. But of course there are methods. I mean, and if you want to understand more, I would suggest that you read a book, say on Mahamudra, you listen, you download. Nowadays there's so many teachings on YouTube by really accomplished masters, and just learn how to get that balance in the mind, where the mind is open and spacious, not wanting, but at the same time open to whatever will happen. Because once that glimpse is there, the potential for further glimpses will arise, as long as we don't grasp at them again. So learning how to put the mind, the awareness, in that balance, so that it is open enough that these things can happen. There are methods taught. I mean, it's something which is better if you meet with a teacher and they explain to you. But the important thing is to keep the mind very relaxed and at the same time very aware. And if we can balance that clarity with that open, spacious emptiness, then it's very likely that will lead you directly to more and more experiences and realizations. Okay, so thank you all very, very much. And of course, thank everybody who has been here organizing this, because, I just come here and go blah, 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 blah. And all the other people behind the scenes are the ones who've done all the work. So I'm very grateful for them to have invited me here, and for all of you here to have been sitting here and listening. And I hope something of what Atisha said you will take home with you and apply to your lives, because, you know, what he is saying is true, and whether or not it benefits us depends on how much we really, you know, apply what he's saying to our lives. In itself, you know, words are just words. We have to take them into our heart and really make use of what he's saying to us. So anyway, thank you all very, very, very much. And I do hope that something that Atisha has said will help you in your lives from now on. So thank you very much. Read more of Atisha. You can download him. And all the masters that came after him, wonderful, wonderful works. So can we just sit for 2 minutes and we will dedicate the merit. As I said, dedication is very important for at this time, especially in the world when there is so much negativity. It's very important to dedicate something positive and, you know, help to change the balance a little bit, because, you know, the world and all the beings in it are in a state of crisis right now. Jamba Pao Jinda Jamba Dan Kundu Zambo De Hande Jinde Dinda Kunji Jesu Dalo Ching Ewa Dida Tanji Ratu Chanju Senju Rimpo Jima Jeba Nanji Jeji Jewa Nyamba Me Bayang Kone Bundu Bewai Shu. Thank you very much.